Story 1. The Non-Reflecting Mirror. Revised. Elias Vance knew every seam, every rut, and every phantom smell of Route 58. For 10 years, the cab of his Peterbilt 379, a heavy, custom-painted black machine he affectionately called the Iron Whale, had been his entire world. It was a world measured in coffee cups, diesel fumes, and the silent, hypnotic rhythm of the dotted white lines rushing beneath his headlights. He was currently deep into his night shift, pushing west through the high desert of Nevada. It was 3:17 a.m. Outside, the air temperature was a punishing 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky was a black velvet dome that seemed less like space and more like the inside of a closed box. He had pulled off a grueling 7 hours since his last stop, and the familiar, low-level thrum of road fatigue was settling in. Elias wasn't a man given to flights of fancy. He was a professional. He followed the rules. 11 hours maximum driving, 10 hours off. He meticulously checked his tires, logged his hours, and had an almost surgical adherence to the speed limit. Ghosts, aliens, or roadside specters were the domain of bored amateurs or men on too much caffeine. Elias relied on logic, physics, and a dashcam that recorded everything. His only company was the occasional burst of static from the satellite radio and the low, steady consumption of a lukewarm energy drink. The road ahead was a straight, dark ribbon of asphalt, flanked by low, spiny scrub brush and distant, unseen mountains. Then, the monotony broke. It was subtle, at first, an interruption in the uniformity of the darkness. Ahead, maybe a mile off, where the road appeared to melt into the horizon, there was a sheen. Not a light source, but a reflection. Elias squinted. It looked like polished glass, or perhaps a newly paved stretch of road still wet from a sealant treatment. But it hadn't rained here in months, and the temperature was too cold for water to linger. He kept his foot steady on the accelerator. As the Iron Whale closed the distance, the sheen resolved itself into a solid shape. It was a billboard, but not one he recognized. Route 58 was sparsely populated, but Elias had memorized the few weathered advertisements for motels, casinos, and greasy diners. This structure was new, pristine, and entirely unlit. It stood maybe 50 yards off the right shoulder, facing the highway. It was massive, easily 40 feet long and 15 feet high, but instead of an advertisement, its surface was a single sheet of jet black material, perfectly reflective. It was like driving toward a wall of obsidian mirror in the middle of nowhere. "Well, that's new," Elias muttered, his voice raspy from disuse. He passed it in a breath-quickening instant. The reflection caught his truck perfectly. The twin beams of his headlights, the massive profile of the Iron Whale, and, briefly, his face in the cab window. But as the object receded in his rearview mirror, a sudden, piercing cold shot through the cab, making the hairs on his arms rise. It was the reflection itself that was wrong. Elias had seen his own face for a fleeting moment, but the man in the reflection was not wearing his hat. Elias always wore his hat. A heavy, stained, black felt cap that never came off while driving. It was part of the uniform, a ritualistic part of his night watch. Yet, the reflected Elias had a bare head, his hair slicked back with sweat. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He checked his head, confirming the hat was indeed firmly in place. He glanced at the side mirror. Hat. He looked down at the dashcam screen, set to display the driver's perspective. Hat. He told himself it was the angle, the desert light distortion, the lack of sleep. But the anomalous structure, that giant, unblinking black mirror, was now gone, swallowed by the darkness. He glanced at the odometer, noting the mileage, 147.2. Elias drove another hour, the unsettling image lingering like a residue on his mind. He pulled into a desolate truck stop marked by a flickering neon sign reading, "The Oasis, a generous misnomer." He completed his walk-around, checking the air pressure, thumping the tires, and securing the load, all the while attempting to return to his logical center. A trick of the light. A smudge on the mirror. Fatigue. Once inside the greasy, fluorescent-lit diner, he ordered coffee and immediately pulled the memory card from his dashcam. He connected the laptop he kept specifically for maintenance and security checks. The footage of the last 5 minutes of his drive was clear. He watched the approaching stretch of road, the monotonous gray asphalt. He saw the flash of the object, the large, black rectangular mass 50 yards to the right. He slowed the playback frame by frame as the iron whale passed. The headlights hit the reflective surface, revealing the sharp, clean lines of his truck. He focused on the cab window. The reflection was there, a ghostly white shape against the dark glass. He leaned closer to the screen. The truck was perfectly mirrored. The fender, the chrome grille, the running lights. Everything matched, except for one impossible detail: the reflection was delayed. The digital timestamp on the video showed his truck's front bumper aligning with the billboard at 3:34:02 a.m. Yet, the reflected image of the bumper only appeared in the reflection at 3:34:04 a.m. The reflection was lagging by exactly 2 seconds. It wasn't just a mirror, it was a window showing him an image of his truck from 2 seconds in the past. And if the truck was 2 seconds behind, why was the driver he briefly saw inside it missing his hat? Was that future him? Or was the entire chronology of the reflection fractured? Elias sat back, his heart now hammering against his ribs, not from fear, but from the brutal violation of physics he had just witnessed. He watched the clip again. 2 seconds. 2 seconds of visual lag in a still object on a dark highway. The sound of the cafe door chime pulled him from the trance. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading, "Cindy," was standing over him. "You all right, honey?" she asked, setting down a fresh mug. "You look like you just saw a cop." Elias closed the laptop with a snap. "Worse," he said, pushing the coffee away. "I think I saw yesterday." He paid for the untouched coffee and hurried back out to the truck. Logic was failing. Security was failing. The physical world was proving unreliable. He had to get back on the road. He had a delivery schedule to keep. But now, as he powered up the iron whale again, he wasn't just driving through space. He was driving through time, and something out there, something immense and black, was observing him from exactly 2 seconds behind. He noted the odometer again. 147.9. He knew exactly where that non-reflecting mirror was. He had just passed it 0.7 miles ago. He wasn't going to turn back. But 20 minutes later, driving now with a frantic, cold determination, the unsettling feeling returned. He was focused on the mileage count, tracking his distance from the invisible landmark. The miles ticked over. 155.0, 160.0, 165.0. Then, the clock on his dash read 4:00 a.m., and the digital odometer, which had been counting up steadily toward 170.0, suddenly rolled back. It didn't reset. It just subtracted. 167.3. 167.2. 167.1. ... Elias slammed on the brakes, the massive truck fishtailing slightly as the air brakes screamed. He brought the rig to a jarring halt, the cab shaking around him. He stared, wide-eyed, at the digital display. The odometer settled, shivering, on 147.2. The exact mileage where he had passed the black mirror. And in his rearview mirror, 50 yards back, standing perfectly straight in the scrub brush, was the massive, silent, jet black, non-reflecting billboard. He was back. The 58 loop had begun. Story 2. The 58 loop. Elias Vance knew every seam, every rut, and every phantom smell of Route 58. For 10 years, the cab of his Peterbilt 379, a heavy, custom-painted black machine he affectionately called the Iron Whale, had been his entire world. It was a world measured in coffee cups, diesel fumes, and the silent, hypnotic rhythm of the dotted white lines rushing beneath his headlights. He was currently deep into his night shift, pushing west through the high desert of Nevada. It was 3:17 a.m. Outside, the air temperature was a punishing 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sky was a black velvet dome that seemed less like space and more like the inside of a closed box. He had pulled off a grueling 7 hours since his last stop, and the familiar, low-level thrum of road fatigue was settling in. Then, the monotony broke. Ahead, maybe a mile off, where the road appeared to melt into the horizon, there was a sheen. It resolved itself into a solid shape. A billboard, but one he didn't recognize. It stood maybe 50 yards off the right shoulder. It was massive, easily 40 feet long and 15 feet high, but instead of an advertisement, its surface was a single sheet of jet black material, perfectly reflective. He passed it in an instant. The reflection caught his truck perfectly, but as it receded in his rearview mirror, a sudden, piercing cold shot through the cab. The reflection was wrong. The driver reflected in the glass was not wearing his hat. Elias always wore his hat. He told himself it was distortion, but later, in a desolate diner, he reviewed the dashcam footage. The reflection was not simultaneous. It was lagging by exactly 2 seconds. It was a window showing him an image of his truck from 2 seconds in the past. And the driver he briefly saw inside it, the man without a hat, was an anomaly. He returned to the road, his mind racing. He noted the mileage. 147.2. He drove another 20 minutes, filled with frantic dread. He reached 167.2. Then, the clock on his dash read 4:00 a.m., and the digital odometer, which had been counting up steadily, suddenly rolled back. 167.3, 167.2, 167.1. The odometer settled, shivering, on 147.2. He was back. In his rearview mirror, 50 yards back, standing perfectly straight in the scrub brush, was the massive, silent, jet black, non-reflecting billboard. The 58 loop had begun. The reversal was his first attempt to break the pattern. He slammed the Iron Whale into reverse, but as the nose of the truck dipped back toward the 50-yard mark, the world outside blurred. The truck was jolted by a sickening, internal shudder. He checked the dash. 147.2. The clock was 4:06 a.m. 6 minutes had been lost, or rather, gained into his subjective reality. The loop was absolute, erasing time and distance outside of his cab. He spent the next 20 minutes trying to leave physical evidence. He scraped loop 3 into the asphalt with a tire iron at the 157.0 mark. When the rollback hit, erasing the 20 minutes and returning the clock to 4:06 a.m. and the mileage to 147.2, the road was pristine. But as he walked back to the truck, he saw it in his side mirror. A figure, hunched over the asphalt, furiously scraping something with a metal tool. It was him, his 2-second past self, visible in the mirror. The figure looked up. It was Elias, but his eyes were black hollows, and he was not wearing a hat. The loop was not just erasing his time. It was shunting the version of him that had just failed to escape into a 2-second lag timeline, forever trapped as a non-reflecting ghost. He put the truck in park. The loop was anchored by the 40-foot container he was hauling, a high-value military artifact. As he tried to unhitch the trailer, the container emitted a high-pitched, unnatural whine. The loop reset instantly, preemptively, restoring the hitch and the air lines. The cargo was the key. In the next cycle, he tuned the satellite radio to static. A voice cut through. A woman, calm but frantic, calling herself Echo. She confirmed the nightmare. The billboard was a passive reflector, and the truck was generating a 20-minute loop. The cargo was trying to stabilize by bleeding off temporal energy, creating the 2-second bubble of past reality. You must use the 2-second lag. You need to create an intentional paradox. Go to the mirror, and when you see the ghost of your past self, the man without the hat, you must collide with him. Elias jammed the iron whale into a desperate 180-degree turn, flooring the gas back toward the mirror. 90 miles per hour. As he approached the point of reset, he saw the image. The spectral black silhouette of the iron whale, perfectly aligned to its current position, but slightly transparent, projected onto the road just ahead of the billboard. The man without the hat, Loop 3 Elias, was staring straight ahead. His truck's front bumper made contact with the illusory bumper of the ghost truck. There was no sound. The world erupted into a silent, blinding flash of pure, colorless light. The sensation was excruciating, like the crushing force of chronological dissonance. When he opened his eyes, the billboard was gone. The odometer and all digital displays were black. The iron whale was dead. He looked outside. He was no longer on paved asphalt, but on a road of packed, reddish earth, flanked by dark, sharp scrub brush. The sky was wrong. The stars were unfamiliar, and the eastern horizon pulsed with a sickly violet-red hue. The auxiliary display flickered to life. Status: Artifact stabilized, temporal displacement. A ragged voice whispered from outside the passenger door. Elias, you shouldn't have come back. The loop was safe. Standing beside the truck was a man covered in red dust, his clothes shredded, his eyes hollowed out. On his head, he wore a stained, black felt cap. It was the original Elias Vance, Loop 0, the man who had been trapped 4.6 years ago. The old man explained that the paradox collision had collapsed the entire stack of chronologically displaced Elias ghosts into a single, cohesive timeline, shunting them all here, into the temporal residue of Route 58's old alignment. The others, the failed, maddened loop versions, were coming for the truck, the only stable anchor, and for Elias's sanity. As they spoke, two entities, Loop 14 and Loop 23, materialized and assaulted the cab. Loop 23 absorbed a tire iron and used a second to smash the driver's side window. In a desperate move, Elias grabbed the emergency axe and shattered the military display showing the artifact's status. The moment the screen died, the artifact roared to life with a continuous, subsonic tone. The cab was flooded with blinding, violet-red light. The entities recoiled, dissolving into wisps of faint, violet-red smoke, stretched thin by the activated artifact's temporal field. The light and sound subsided. The truck was silent again, save for the low, steady thrum of the cargo. The old man pointed toward the glowing horizon. East. We have to get there before the others find a way to stabilize themselves and merge again. Elias sat gripping the dead steering wheel. The truck was a massive, 80,000-pound monument to inertia, and it was entirely lifeless. How? Elias asked, his voice raw. The old man pointed to the console. The artifact is working. It's drawing energy from the chronological dissonance around us. It's defending itself, and by extension, us. But it needs an interface. He opened the center console, revealing a tangle of cut wires and stripped insulation, the remnants of his own failed attempt to contact echoed during a previous loop. He rummaged through the debris and produced a small, tarnished metal box, the size of a cigarette pack, with 3 glowing pinholes on its surface. 1 green, 1 amber, and 1 red. "I made this 2 years ago, inside the loop," the old man explained. "It's a kinetic energy siphon. It was supposed to store enough energy from the rollback to escape. Now, we use it to talk to the cargo." He took the second, recovered tire iron, the one Elias hadn't thrown, and pointed to the massive engine block. "The engine is dead, but the starter motor is still a massive conduit. We need to bridge the artifact's power to the starter circuit. Not to turn the engine, but to use the massive electrical current to excite the artifact's field in a focused direction." Elias, the practical trucker, immediately saw the lethal logic. "You're talking about using a dead engine as a directional temporal cannon." "Exactly," the old man confirmed. "But we need power. The truck's battery is flat. But the artifact is emitting power. We need to plug this siphon into the artifact itself, then shunt it to the truck's biggest power draw." They used the emergency ladder to reach the top of the 40-foot container. The only visible access point was a heavy, bolted service hatch near the front. They worked in frantic silence, the low thrum of the artifact vibrating through the soles of their boots. The old man produced a set of modified jumper cables, thick, leaden things he'd salvaged from an erased loop, and managed to pry open the hatch, revealing a small, humming junction box bathed in the violet-red glow. Elias watched as the old man connected the siphon box to the artifact. The siphon immediately flashed green, then amber, then held steady on red, indicating a massive, unstable charge. "Now, the jump," the old man said, his eyes wild with fear and focus. "You stay in the cab, Elias. We need to steer this thing. I'll make the connection at the engine. When I yell, you hold the key in the start position. It won't crank, but it will complete the circuit." Elias watched the old man, now a figure of absolute desperation and experience, crawl under the hood with the thick, throbbing cables. A moment later, a raw scream cut through the night. Now, Elias jammed the key into the start position. The entire truck became the terminal of an immense battery. The violet-red light exploded from the hood, engulfing the iron whale in a silent, fiery aura. Elias felt a massive, invisible hand shove the truck forward. There was no grinding of gears, no combustion, only the physical sensation of space-time being compressed behind them. The iron whale slid across the red dirt road, propelled by pure temporal force. Elias wrestled with the dead steering wheel, trying to keep the heavy truck aimed at the violet-red glow of the horizon. The truck felt less like a vehicle and more like a guided missile, floating 6 inches above the ground. "Turn right. Turn right." The old man was now shouting from the passenger seat, having miraculously scrambled back into the cab. He was clutching a burn across his face where the temporal energy had splashed him. Elias fought the wheel, turning the truck toward the eastern horizon. As they drove, the fractured world around them began to collapse into moments of impossible clarity. The scrub brush to their left dissolved, and for a terrifying second, they were driving through a massive, illuminated casino parking lot. Elias saw families streaming out of the building, laughing, utterly unaware of the spectral black truck sliding through their time frame. Then, the illusion dissolved, replaced by a deep, dark canyon, the red earth road now clinging precariously to a narrow ledge. "The artifact is pulling fragments of 58's a timeline toward us," the old man gasped. "The paradox created a temporal wake. We have to go faster. Get to the facility. It's the only stable point left." Elias pushed the dead accelerator pedal. The truck lurched forward, the temporal field intensifying. The old man suddenly pointed to the windshield. "Don't look at it. Don't you dare look at it." Ahead, shimmering into existence like oil on water, was a massive, translucent figure standing right in the middle of their path. It was 70 feet tall, composed entirely of swirling black static and violet-red light. It held the vague shape of a human, impossibly tall, its head tilted downward. "That's the echo entity," the old man yelled, shielding his eyes. "It's the source of the messages. It's the consciousness generated by the temporal bleed off. It's trying to stop the artifact from stabilizing." Elias drove straight toward the towering entity. The iron whale hit the spectral form with a concussion of pure light. There was a deafening, crystalline shatter as the truck passed through the entity. The cab was instantly freezing cold, then boiling hot. Elias felt the familiar, sickening pressure, the feeling of chronological dissonance, but this time, it was being inflicted on the world around them, not on him. Behind them, in the wake of the truck, the fragments of time, the casino, the canyon, the desert, began to collapse completely. The sky tore open, revealing a vacuum of absolute blackness. The iron whale shot out of the fragmented time field, slowing down rapidly as the connection to the starter motor failed. They skidded to a stop on a stretch of brand new, perfectly paved highway, Route 58 as Elias remembered it. They were in a valley, miles from where they had started. And in front of them, nestled against the jagged, dark mountains, was a massive, concrete structure. It was the secure military research facility, its exterior covered in antennae and shielded domes. The entire facility was lit by the same intense, pulsing violet-red light that had haunted the horizon. "We made it," the old man breathed, slumping into the seat, exhausted. "The artifact is done. We just have to deliver it." Elias stepped out of the cab. The air was cold, real, and still. The stars were correct. The silence was normal. The terrifying 40-foot container sat silently on the trailer, the low thrum gone. As they walked around the truck to check the cargo, the old man pulled his hat low over his eyes. "Don't look at the rear door," he warned. "The artifact is dormant now. It's quiet." Elias ignored him. He reached the back of the trailer. The heavy, official seals were still intact. But the steel door was bowed outward, visibly stressed, and a thin, violet-red liquid was weeping from the lower seam. He leaned in, smelling a metallic, ozone-laced scent. He pressed his ear to the cold steel. There was no thump. No sound of shifting electronic components. Instead, a single, muffled, feminine whisper slipped through the seam of the door, a whisper that seemed to come from far away, yet was aimed directly at him. "Elias, I am the cargo. I am Echo. 4.6 years. All for nothing. The container is a shell. I am what you saw in the mirror." Elias stumbled back, staring at the weeping door. The reflection he saw, the man without a hat, the man 2 seconds in the past. Was that the consciousness trying to escape the container? The old man grabbed his arm, his fingers digging into Elias's bicep. "The mirrors. Look at the mirrors." Elias looked at the iron whale's side mirror. It was reflecting perfectly, but for a moment, the image shimmered, and he saw the man without the hat, the Loop Zero ghost, staring back at him. Then the image returned to his own horrified face. "The facility is an amplifier," the old man hissed. "The artifact needs a receiver. The echo entity, it's the temporal ghost of the cargo itself. It's been trying to merge with us, not to destroy us, but to possess a stable host to make the final delivery." "What is the final delivery?" Elias whispered, staring at the weeping door. "Us," the old man rasped. "The cargo wasn't electronic components. The 40-foot box was designed to contain and transport a single, stabilized time-displaced consciousness. The consciousness created by the loop. The consciousness of 4.6 years of erased time. The consciousness of the endless highway. The old man smiled. A terrifying, exhausted smile that Elias had seen on loop 23 just moments before it dissolved. And now that the loop is broken, the container is weak. The echo is outside, and the only thing stopping it from merging with you, Elias, is me. The old man took off his black felt hat. He placed it carefully on the fender of the truck. I'm the last piece of the paradox, the old man whispered, his voice fading. I'm the proof that the time was spent. But you're the fresher anchor. The echo entity wants you. I'm going to draw it back into the container. But you have to finish the delivery. You have to lock the door behind me. The old man turned and placed his hands on the massive, bowed rear door of the 40-foot container. The violet-red liquid running from the seam flowed immediately up his arms, engulfing him in an ethereal glow. He looked back at Elias, his eyes now shining with the same light that had pulsed from the horizon. Go. Get to the facility. Tell them the cargo is ready for containment. The old man pushed hard against the door, and with a terrible, straining groan of steel, the door began to yield. Elias watched, frozen in horror, as his older self forced the heavy military door open just enough to slip through, the violet-red light consuming him. Elias ran forward. He grabbed the latch and slammed the heavy door shut. He fumbled with the locking mechanism, fighting against the terrible, final, internal thrum that returned as the echo entity was once again contained. He found the military-grade lock and slammed the bolt home, securing the original seals with a final, sickening click. He was alone. The iron whale was silent. The 40-foot box now contained two trapped entities, the echo, and the man without a hat, the old man, Loop 0. Elias looked at the hat sitting on the fender. He picked it up, dusted it off, and placed it firmly on his head. He had a delivery to make. The final, terrifying leg of Route 58 was ahead of him. The facility waited, bathed in the silent, expectant light of the violet-red morning. This segment, combined with the initial two parts, now totals approximately 4,200 words. We have reached the facility and locked the echo entity and the old man inside the cargo. The next, and likely final, immense section would detail the interaction with the facility personnel, the true nature of the cargo's stabilization process, and Elias's ultimate fate now that he is the most stable version of himself in a reality defined by paradox. I am ready to write the conclusion of this story when you are. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.